Good morning, everyone, and many thanks for coming on this call this morning. I hope the weather where you are is better than it's been here. We've had torrential rain all night long, and the garden looks pretty flooded. I'm John Cox, and I'm the District 71 Director, and I have the pleasure of introducing my co-speaker this morning, who is Brenda Lannon, our Public Relations Manager. I also believe that Daniel Sanders, our Club Growth Director, and Gerard Mannix, our Programme Quality Director, are also on the call this morning and will be available to answer any questions. Brenda will be facilitating your written questions, and there'll be a chance for delegates to be unmuted and come onto the call at the end of the presentation. And can I please ask you to keep your questions specifically to this subject? The slides and the recording of this webinar will be available after today. If you have written questions, please type them into the box at the bottom of your control panel to the right of your screen, I believe it will be. Brenda and I are going to try and make the session reasonably conversational, so we'll be bouncing questions off each other. I think that guest nights and open nights or open evenings or open house are probably one of the best ways to grow our members and to grow our club. And in my 14 years in Toastmasters, I've been involved in many open house or guest nights, and some of those have been extremely successful, bringing in many new members, and some less so, and some where only one or two visitors turned up on the night. And there is no doubt in my mind about the ingredients for success, and that many of those ingredients were missing or absent on the less successful nights. So let me briefly describe what we're going to be covering this morning. We're going to look at when is the best time to run an open house and guest night. And if I can probably touch on that now, is that there are, in my mind, there are two best times to run open house and guest nights. And these are the times when people are starting to think about their careers, probably starting to think about keeping fit, probably starting to think about their personal development. And these are straight in the new year after they've established their thoughts for the new year, and probably straight after the summer holidays. So those to me would be the two best nights to think about running open house and guest nights, but there's no reason why you can't run them any time of the year. But those are probably times when people are starting to think about their futures. We're going to look at planning the event. We're going to talk about flyers and posters and how can you make those as powerful as possible. We're going to look at different options for attracting visitors to the guest night and the use of social media. We've certainly seen some good examples of people getting out into the community and getting those flyers and posters into as many places as possible in their local community. We need to tap into member contacts. This is a multiplying effect, as if you've got 10 members or 20 members and each of those can send information out to another 10 members, then you're going to start to see a multiplying effect on the number of people that you're getting contact to. And in my mind, again, it's all about numbers. The more you do, the more results you're going to get. And then we're going to look at the agenda and the actual format of the evening and the importance of following up afterwards. So that's the plan. And I'm now going to hand over to Brenda. So if I can welcome Brenda to kick us off with the next slide.
Thank you, John. We're going to look throughout the course of the webinar at the 5 P's, which stand for purpose, planning the meeting, preparing for the meeting, promoting your meeting, and post-meeting or after the meeting. Next slide, please, John. Why would we hold an open house meeting? Between renewal dates, there will be members who can't renew for various reasons. So it's important for clubs to grow their membership and to retain their membership. And open house meetings are a way to raise awareness about your club in your local community in order to grow your membership and to become a sustainable club. The number of them, John, go ahead.
I think that's an important point you've raised there, Brenda, about the fact that it's inevitable, I think, that almost at every renewal time, there are going to be those members that don't renew because they've moved on in their careers, or they've moved away, or they've got married, or they've had children. And I think we always need to make sure that we find a way of replacing those that we've lost, and in fact ending up with a net growth rather than a net loss in members. Sorry, I'll hand back to you.
Thanks, John. That's very true. That even the most established clubs and the strongest clubs from a membership point of view lose members from one renewals period to the next, and they find new members are joining, but they're just replacing members who have left the club. So it's important to think about and to consider your membership renewals and your membership growth. Next slide, please, John. Planning your meeting. The venue for the open house meeting is very important, especially if you're going to invite a lot of potential guests and potential members to the meeting. It's important to ensure that your venue is suitable for a larger group of people coming to the venue. Also, and I'll touch on this later on when we're talking about promotion, ask your venue for any assistance in publicising and promoting your open house. So ask them, can you put up a poster or a flyer in their venue? As John has mentioned, the timing of your open house meeting is important. It may happen in the early period in September, October, in the early part of the year, or around this time of the year when members or people are thinking about New Year's resolutions and they still are thinking about them and they want to put them into action. We'll talk about the importance of the tea and coffee break at the meeting. It gives an opportunity for guests to talk to members and to become more comfortable in a new environment. Next slide, please, John.
Just before we move on, Brenda, just going back to the venue, I think you're right, is about the importance of that. It's often useful as well as if you can have a venue that becomes attractive to get visitors in. I know when I've run events in the past, if we've used a local football club or a local cricket club, that's often been quite good because people want to come and have a look at the facilities there. So if you've got a venue that would encourage guests to want to attend, that's worth doing as well. Going back on the refreshments as well, I would certainly publish in your flyers that there are refreshments, tea, coffee, cake, biscuits available, particularly if people are coming straight from work. It gives them a reason for coming along because they can get something to eat and drink as well. I'll move on to the next slide for you, Brenda. Oh, it's my slide, I think.
It's your slide.
I've put this slide here because it's something that I've used for a long time, even outside of Toastmasters. Is that a few years ago I was involved in a membership organization that had these 5 steps that they would guarantee would always get a number of the right number of people to an event. And they suggested that if you followed these 5 steps, you could almost guarantee that you would get 40, 50, 60 people to an event. And their suggestion was that you need to get 50 to 100 emails out to potential visitors or potential guests. And you could certainly do that by using your membership. If you've got 20 members and they can get an email out to 10 people that they know, then that's 200 people that are being contacted. So just think about, again, that multiplying effect that you can get by tapping into your members' contacts. They also suggested that you need 200 flyers or posters out into the local community. And again, just looking at some of the things that we've done is that we've gone into our local communities, we've gone into supermarkets and put things up on their notice boards. We've gone into coffee shops, we've gone into libraries, we've gone into doctors' surgeries, veterinary practices, opticians, anywhere that has a notice board then we've looked at could we get our flyer up into there. I've noticed one of the clubs recently on Facebook have managed to get their flyers in almost every shop in their locality into the window. So just think about how you can distribute those 200 flyers and posters. It's also about getting editorials and testimonials into your local press or into your local radio stations. So anything you can do to get that in is worth doing as well. It was also suggested that you need to make as much use of social media as possible, Facebook, Meetup, and try and get your club guest night information onto at least 5 other LinkedIn pages. So if you can get something onto your local Chamber of Commerce or any other organizations where you're going to find your potential members and try and get that information up there. We've certainly used Meetup a lot. Is that the clubs that I'm involved in, there's one of those has got nearly 1,000 Meetup members now because they've been using Meetup for probably about 8 years. And not many of those Meetup members that are on there have actually turned up at a meeting. So you can email every Meetup member on a regular basis. And certainly if you've got a guest night or open house coming up, then you can take advantage of using that to publicize the event to all those Meetup people. We get a continual drip of people that have gone on to Meetup coming into our clubs. So almost every meeting that we have, there's probably 2 or 3 people will come to that meeting as a visitor, and they've come via Meetup. So we certainly take a great use of Meetup as being the vehicle to attract people in. I've mentioned earlier on about looking at individual members' personal contacts and using that word of mouth as being important. So there's some further thoughts for you. I'll come back to what I mentioned earlier on, that this is all about numbers. The more people you can contact, the more people that know about you, the better chance you've got of getting a full contingent of people turning up at your guest night. Back over to you, Brenda.
I'm going to look at some methods of promoting the open night. And as John has mentioned, there are many methods. Flyers and posters are one method in which you can promote your open house. And there are templates available on the toastmasters.org website. But these can be adapted to suit your club and to make your open house event an exciting event that people will want to attend. Second method is by social media, and as John has mentioned, there are many methods of social media. You can see in the icon all the logos for the various social media platforms. You've got Twitter, you've got Meetup, you've got Facebook, and there are some there that I don't recognize. But on social media, if your club has a social media presence, ask your individual members if they're happy to share those posts, because for every person in your club that has a social media presence, they have friends on their Facebook page as well, and they can be shared. Also ask your area directors to share on their Facebook pages as well. Next slide, please, John.
Again, if I can just come in on that, Brenda, is that I would always encourage clubs to start thinking about their guest night or their open house at least 2 months in advance, and use those 2 months to do all of your promotion. Certainly the lesson we've learnt over the new year is that if you have got something happening in January, then December's a bit of a waste of time to do a lot of publicity. So you need to be starting fairly early, probably November or October. So the more time you've got to build up to it, the better. The other thing it gives you the opportunity to do is to actually put some publicity out on a regular basis. So we've used things like Facebook and put probably something up on Facebook almost every week with a slightly different heading and a slightly different content, but still focusing on that same event. If you look at the bottom right-hand flyer on this screen, this is the one that we've had the most success from. And we actually capitalized on the fact that Strictly Come Dancing was on, and Ed Balls, who was certainly almost a no-hoper in winning that event, but he was a trier, and we actually used that as a way of focusing on, and I think we used the heading, if the Ed Balls can do it, you can do it. And we pushed that out on a regular basis leading up to the event, and we ended up with over 60 people turning up, or over 60 visitors turning up to that guest night. So just think about the quality of your flyer, and think about not just pushing it out once, but trying to push it out almost every week leading up to the event. Brenda, back to you.
As mentioned before, get out into the community, spreading the word about Toastmasters and various organisations in your community, your library, your local shopping centre, your local parish centre, community centre, a sports club that's near you. Distribute your flyers and posters widely. As we've mentioned, tap into your member contacts. Their word of mouth is free. It's free publicity, it's free promotion for your club. And that's how I joined Toastmasters. Was a friend of mine I knew was a Toastmaster, and that's how I came to join Toastmasters. Media releases, send a notification of the meeting to your local newspaper or your local radio station. If there's a TV station nearby, send a media release. As John mentioned, getting out into community and promoting your open house is a great way of attracting guests and potentially growing your membership. Next slide, please, John.
Could you give us some tips, Brenda, on how to get stuff into the local media? One of the interesting things that I've found with being involved with Irish clubs recently is that their local community newspapers are still very, very prevalent, whereas that's less so in the UK. We don't tend to have our local newspapers in the way that we used to have. They've now become part of a national group, whereas in Ireland, I think your local newspapers are still in existence and still very local. So do you have any tips on how we can get there?
They are local, and they're free newspapers that are distributed in the community, in shopping centres mostly, but it's contacts that are built up through the VPPR, that they contact a reporter who works in the newspaper, or by just emailing the local newspaper and saying, we're holding this event. Because the newspaper is local, they want to hear about local events, but give them plenty of notice so that they can feature the article in their newspaper. Also, there's a local radio station in Dublin who will announce forthcoming events, and likewise a bit of notice has to be given to them as well.
Do you tend to find that your local newspapers and your local radio stations cater for a specific audience rather than a general audience? You know, certainly I find that our local radio stations probably tend to be listened by an older audience rather than a younger audience. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, the local newsletter papers would cater for a general audience, but the radio station that I'm thinking of would generally tend to cater for a younger audience.
All right, so that's a good idea then, isn't it? It's to try and find a radio station that is attracting a younger audience as well. But you know, certainly my experience is that our local BBC radio stations are usually listened by an older audience.
Are there community radio stations? I know there are community radios as well.
Okay, thanks for that, Brenda. Next slide for you.
Preparation for the meeting is key. This isn't an ordinary Toastmasters meeting. It's an opportunity for the club to showcase their club. Preparing for the meeting. Involve all your members. Ask members what they would like to do, whether it be distributing posters and flyers in their local area? Would they like to sit with the Sergeant at Arms to welcome guests into the meeting? Get opinions and inputs from your members in deciding what kind of a meeting you are going to have. Will you have a themed meeting? How can you promote your meeting? The promotion of your meeting will depend on where you are geographically located. For example, if you're in a country area, maybe Facebook, social media may not be the way to promote your club. Maybe the local press, the local posters and flyers and posting in your local community, that may be a better way to promote your club. So ask your members to input into that process. Make sure that all your members have their badges and have guest badges as well. We all remember the first time we walked into a room full of strangers and to meet a sea of people who you don't know and to be introduced to 10 people and you've forgotten their names before you sit down. So make sure to have member badges. Also make sure that the guests are seated beside a member who will be able to explain to the new guest what's going to happen during the course of the meeting. Guest packs are very important as a welcoming tool for new guests. And can we move on to the next slide, please, John? Here,
okay. Just before we move on, do you have any thoughts on the content of that meeting? Is it a slimmed down? I mean, certainly we've slimmed it down, that we haven't had all of the roles and everything else that we've had to create more time for networking, more time for questions and answers, more time for members to describe their experiences. Do you have a feel for what that content should look like?
It's coming in a later slide, John.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you very much. So let's move on to the guest pack then.
These are suggestions for what you may like to include in your welcome pack. A welcoming letter from your president, and if possible, personalize it. So when a guest arrives and you have the president's letter, find out the guest's name and address the letter to that person. It just makes the guest feel more welcome. Include testimonials from members, both new and more seasoned members, on their experiences of being a Toastmaster. Also include a membership application form, Toastmasters magazines. I'm sure we all have Toastmasters magazines at home that we've read and that are just taking up space at home, so donate them to your local club. And information on pathways, not too detailed, just an overview of what the educational programme is about.
We've added a couple of other things. We've added a couple of other things to that list, Brenda, which are quite useful. Is that on the Toastmasters International website, there's a sheet that talks about the benefits of Toastmasters membership, and you can download that. It's a free download, so you could add that into the pack. So it really describes what you can get out of being a member of Toastmasters. The other thing that we've got in our pack, and I came across it a long time ago, is a brief description of each of the roles that you see at the meeting, a brief description of how the lights are used or what the lights are used for. So again, when they go away from the meeting, they've got a reminder of the things that they've seen during that night, and maybe some of the things they didn't see that night that may actually be introduced in other normal meetings. So there are a couple of other things that you could add to your guest pack. Oh, I see now. This is the meeting.
The meeting itself, the program will need to be adapted for the open house meeting to facilitate more conversation at or more time for conversation at the tea and coffee break. But the running of the meeting and the organisation of the meeting should have experienced or long-term members in the major roles for the meeting. So your top Toastmaster, your topics master, your evaluators and general evaluators should, if at all possible, be experienced members. The Toastmaster should explain in more detail what's going to happen for the meeting to inform the guests about Toastmasters and the format of the meeting. The topics master, although the session might be a little bit shorter than at a normal meeting, the topics should be light and topics that anybody can answer and not necessarily difficult topics. Evaluators and general evaluators obviously the evaluations should be positive and encouraging for the member who's spoken. Also, it is a good idea to have speakers at various levels throughout the educational programs. If a guest comes and there are 4 really, really advanced speakers, they may be put off from joining the club because they see themselves as not being able to attain that goal, and it may put them off. The longer tea and coffee break to allow for networking, the guests and members should talk about the Toastmasters organisation and their club, and what members should inform the guests what Toastmasters has meant for them.
What are your thoughts, Brenda, on engaging guests in the table topic session? Is there a non-threatening way of doing that without just throwing them in at the deep end? What are your thoughts on that?
I think there is a way of doing it, and I saw it at a meeting a couple of weeks ago. It wasn't an open house meeting, but a guest came and seemed very uncomfortable about speaking. But the topics master asked them just to say what their name was and to say why they had come, and it was a way of getting the person to stand up and to speak for the first time at a meeting. And sometimes speaking for the first time at a meeting can be the most scary part.
Thank you for that. I think the other thing that we've found quite useful is to have a panel questions and answers session towards the end. So we've had a panel of maybe 3 or 4 members, all from different levels and different experiences and different lengths of membership, to answer questions from the audience, but also to start off by saying why did they join Toastmasters and what are the benefits that they've got from it. So using that panel as a way of encouraging a question and answer session towards the end.
And then there'll be some guests, John, who will only be too happy to stand up and speak, and they don't feel nervous about speaking on a topic that they're familiar with and they're happy to talk about. And they should be welcomed to speak as well.
I've got to think, I think it's something that Daniel has mentioned recently. There's a video explaining a little bit about engaging visitors and guests by giving them a small card when they come in to list something on that card of one of their experiences or one of their achievements, and then having a bit of a question and answer session, reading out 2 or 3 of those cards and asking if the audience could identify who it was that had made that statement, and then handing it back over to that individual that made that statement to explain why they put it. And I thought that was just another way of breaking the ice in terms of getting people a little bit involved, but talking about something that they've done or something that they've achieved in their lives. Just
great idea.
Here's your next slide.
After your meeting, talk to your guests, ask them what they thought of the meeting, answer any questions they may have about the meeting or when you're going to have your next meeting. They may have questions about how often you meet up. Is the meeting always the same as the open house meeting? Obviously, thank them for coming to the meeting. And something that in some clubs it's forgotten, or somebody may forget to invite the guests to come back to the next meeting and to join. It's not to push them into joining, but just to ask them so that they feel welcome to join. But it's an important thing to do, to invite them to join.
Again, some of the things that we've tried and seem to have worked, Brenda, is that we offered a discount for anybody that joined within the next 2 meetings, particularly from a guest night. So we try and then get them to make a decision as soon as possible about whether Toastmasters is right for them. And I think we've usually offered something like a 10 or a 15% discount if they joined within the next 2 meetings, joined and paid. There's something that I came across on Toastmasters International website, which is a little card that they can put their name on the card when they come in. And it also gets you a bit of information on the back of the card that tells you a bit about them, their email address, their phone number, how did they hear about the meeting. But it's also got a little questionnaire on it as well. Is that, were you satisfied with your first visit to this Toastmasters club? Are the benefits of joining Toastmasters clear to you? Are Toastmasters educational opportunities right for your goals? And would you like to hear from a club leader to learn more about Toastmasters? Now, that little card is available in the Toastmasters shop and goes into one of those badge holders. And I thought it's quite a nice little item. So you may just want to go on and have a look at that. And certainly, again, it's something that we've tried and it seemed to have worked quite well.
Just in relation to contacting the guest after the meeting, John, in relation to GDPR, it's important to also ask the guest, would it be okay for someone to contact them by phone or by email, and which is the best method to communicate with them after the meeting?
It's also about getting back to them quickly, isn't it? Is that we've certainly done our best to make sure that we get back to them, if not the following day, within 48 hours, to thank them for coming and tell them a bit more about Toastmasters and to invite them to the next meeting. I also remember somebody telling me that speed stuns. So the quicker that you can get back to somebody, the more enthused they are about the fact that you care about them and that you're interested in them and that you want them to join. Next slide. If I can talk a little bit about this one, is that having done quite a lot of stuff in the past on sales and trying to win business, is that this comes to a certain extent also from Moments of Truth. If anybody's read the Moments of Truth book from Jan Carlson, who was the chief executive of Swedish Air Services, SAS, some years ago, and he wrote a book that said that every single minute of the day, we are giving out an impression of our organization to our customers. And this information that's in the screen in front of you describes some of those experiences. He said that any contact with our organization, people are going to get one of these 3 experiences. They're going to get an ouch experience, which is unforgettable and awful. And if you think about it, if we get a bad experience, we tend to tell a lot of other people about it. So news travels fast if you deliver a bad experience. Most experiences that we all have in any customer contact is okay. It's no better, no worse than we expected it to be. And it's a very forgettable experience. Occasionally, and I say occasionally because it's not one of those things that happens all the time, occasionally we'll get an outstanding experience or a wow experience. And again, it's one of those magical experiences and totally unforgettable. And again, you will actually talk to lots of other people about those experiences. So it's one of those news travels fast. And maybe we need to think about on our guest nights, how do we try and make sure that every one of those guests that visit us on that night go away thinking, wow, that was an unforgettable experience. It was a magical experience and I want to join. So what kind of things could we do to make that experience extraordinary? And maybe if we look at things like coffee and tea, the small things, coffee, tea and biscuits, it's a little thing that makes a difference. I think the way in which we treat every guest on that night, in the way we communicate with them, the way we link them in with a member, the way we try and answer all of those questions well, how positive and enthusiastic we all are, will actually add to that experience and make it an unforgettable experience. I don't know whether you've got any thoughts on that, Brenda, about what you think may actually make that meeting an extraordinary meeting.
One of the things that is coming into my head, John, is make the meeting fun.
Yes.
Have a light topic session and call on members that you know will provide an entertaining answer and that will lead to a laugh, and you want to create a light-hearted atmosphere, a friendly atmosphere for the guest.
I think that's getting back to people as well. That certainly that impresses people. I think is that I actually went to one club meeting some time ago at another club where they had an iPad in the room where they took members the guest details, and before that guest left the meeting, they had already emailed to them about the next meeting. So when they arrived home that night, if they went on their computers or if they went on their iPads or if they went on their phones, they would find an email from the club instantly from the meeting that they just attended. And I think that's impressive, isn't it? That's a wow experience.
Having a newer member speaking in the club as well, John, maybe an icebreaker speech or one of the first speeches in level 1 to show how a guest can stand up and speak in front of a group of people.
Do you have any feelings about the content of the speeches on that night? Is there something that we can do to ensure that those speeches are quite inspirational and memorable? Do you have any thoughts on what that content should look like? And maybe we can guide whichever speakers we choose to do that guest night or open house, we can guide them in terms of their speech content. Do you have any thoughts?
I would have one of the newer members speaking, John, on level 1 pathways, one of the speeches in level 1. And if you have members in your club that are working through the old program, maybe there might be a level 10 speaker who is reaching a milestone in the old program, doing their 10th speech, and it's a way to show the guests how recognition in Toastmasters works, and that a member has achieved 10 speeches and will be attaining the Competent Communicator Award. Also, you may like to have an evaluator who is achieving a level 1 in pathways so that they can be recognized during the course of that meeting as well.
How important is humor in those speeches?
Hugely.
Yes, so we need to again ensure that whoever's speaking that night tries to make their speeches light-hearted and humorous.
Yes. Yeah, that's very important, John.
Okay, tell us a bit about the resources available then, Brenda. Are you there? Hello.
Sorry, John, I was muted. Can you hear me, John?
Yes, I can hear you now. I thought you'd left me.
Sorry. The Toastmasters International website has a lot of information. They have sample flyers, they have webinars, and they have media release templates. Our own District 71 website has information from webinars that have already taken place, and we also have the blueprint for club and membership growth, which was created by Mr. John Cox. So, John, would you like to talk about this document?
I'd
And
love
you
to
have
talk.
it there as well.
I'd love to talk about it. When I was club growth director, I felt that it would be quite useful to put together a package of materials and tips and guidance and ideas on how we can grow clubs and how we can grow members. And I produced this toolkit. I think it's sort of a 70-odd page document with lots of template documents as well. And it looks at all aspects of the things that we've covered today and more. So if you go onto the B71 website and use that URL that I've shown you there, you can actually pick up that kit and you can print it off. It's there. We actually made some hard copies of it, and hard copies were distributed to division directors and area directors at the time. But as to whether they've passed those on, I'm not so sure. But if you go onto the B71 website and use that URL, you can find that information there and you can download all the materials. District support, Brenda.
Sorry, John, typing answers to a couple of questions.
Oh, right.
Incentives. Okay. There are incentives that the PR is coming out of the PR budget from the district for open house meetings. There's an incentive to promote your meeting. So let me know how you've promoted your meeting. If you promote on social media, generally, I will see that. Keep your guest list for the night of your open house meeting. And if you have guests that are joining up as members, register those members and let me know so that we can distribute the incentives to you. Next slide, please, John. My colleague, the Club Growth Director, Daniel, also has the incentives from the Club Growth Budget. Daniel, do you want to talk about them? I'll just unmute you. You're self-muted, John or Daniel.
You may be having a coffee.
Daniel?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello?
Hi, Daniel.
Good morning, Daniel. Welcome.
Yes, good morning. In terms of the Club Growth Director incentives, they're focused at membership building primarily. And at the moment, we're running the Talk Up Toastmasters campaign with progressive incentives all the way up to 10 or more new members, which will get you into a free draw for a Killarney conference registration. And we're also returning with the next membership campaign, Beat the Clock, which is May and June, and it'll be a very similar concept. Another thing I will say right now is that if you're from an Irish club, beware of the summer holidays. Get your open night in before the energy starts to fade away in May.
Thank you, Daniel. One of the things we've found, if we have a really good open night, it isn't a one-off event. But we've usually found that the publicity that we've given out creates some momentum for not just the open night, but the meetings following on from the open night. So we've often found that we get a good attendance on open night, and then we start to see an increase in guests attending the next few meetings. So clearly the publicity that we've done prior to the guest night or the open house has had a knock-on effect, not just for the open night itself or the guest night itself, but for subsequent meetings. So it actually is to bring people in.
Yes, we found both at Cranfield and at Northampton that on the open night itself, there are always going to be people that saw it but weren't free. And so both those clubs, we purposely ran the next two subsequent meetings as we called them guest nights, but effectively the mentality behind the agenda matched that of the open night. Lots of space to interact with guests, lots of easy table topics to get them involved, lots of very well explained roles, very purposeful agenda to make it welcoming. And Northampton has transited from being a 20-something club to a 30-something club with that kind of approach to working with members and guests.
Yes, so some great examples.
Daniel, you also mentioned in your question about ensuring that a speaker, the speech that they're speaking is suitable for the audience. Do you want to expand on that?
I will just briefly expand on that. My home club, Cranfield Speakers, is a campus-based club, and we have a really big freshers open night in October. And this year, not enough thought went into the agenda because we ended up picking speakers that were older than their parents, and some of the speaking standards were lower than they already had on their own degree courses. And so, and that was a shame really, because in the club and in the committee we had PhD students, and they were busy being our counters. We really should have caught that one and got the demographics right. Young needs to speak to young.
Yes, that's a sensible idea, Daniel. Brenda, before we go into our final tips, have we got any questions that we can respond to? Have we got anybody that wishes to ask a question online?
Howard would like to speak. Howard Balkind, is that correct, Howard?
It is, Brenda. Can you hear me?
Good morning.
Morning.
Morning, Howard.
We did slightly different to what you've done. What we did is we had a committee meeting, first of all, and one person was actually appointed to run the whole show and then appoint other people. We advertised through the various sites on Google, Facebook, Eventbrite, but we advertised that we meet on the first and third Tuesday of every month, and on that basis, but the open night was like 3 months ahead. People started to come to the earlier meetings, and with 5 new members without even getting to the open night. I did send you some slides of the what I put together and presented to the area meeting, and it has proved very successful. So I would think that we've got to sort of combine your ideas, which I've found very interesting today, and things that work are the important things for me as far as I'm concerned.
I think you're right, Howard, is that every bit of publicity is useful, isn't it? And
yeah.
I think it's about that building momentum, which happens. And as we said earlier,
one of the things I've actually done is I used to be a local councillor in Salford and stayed very friendly with the press that report, and I butter them up and I've invited to the meeting, and I know that they're coming to the open meeting. So hopefully we'll get in the Manchester Evening News, which will help not only our local club, but we have 3 other clubs in the area. So it will go right across the Greater Manchester area. And I think we're not just doing open nights for our own club, but the open nights should actually be based on people that might come from maybe out of town or another part of Manchester that may well want to visit another club because it's nearer to them.
Yes, that's it again, isn't it? It has the knock-on effect with all the other clubs in the locality. Thank you very much for that, Howard. Brenda, have you got any other questions?
John McFadden has his hand up.
Morning, John.
You're on mute, John.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, John.
Morning. I've got two questions, if I may. One is, let's say we had an open evening and we got 50 or 60 guests there. Does anyone have any experience of what sort of percentage of those 60 guests are likely to become members?
Certainly from my experience, when we had that kind of number, we actually had 15 or 16 that signed up fairly quickly.
Okay.
I think that we had a sort of then a dribble of the others. And, you know, my guess is that after that, we probably got at least a third of that joined as members, and maybe we did slightly better. But
Yeah.
I think there's never an easy answer to that question, I don't think.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. The only other question I had was, I don't know if anyone's got any experience or guidance on this, but we use a hotel for our venue, and it's a very, very good venue. But if we were to put on tea, coffee and biscuits for 60 people, I imagine it would cost us at least £300, which makes it, you know, prohibitive. Even if we got 15 new members, we would lose money from that experience. Does anyone have any experience of running it without tea and coffee, or any thoughts on that?
You can always get your members to make cakes. Brenda and I were talking about that earlier on, and we've certainly done that. Is that we've made sure that members brought the cakes in, which keeps the price down. But inevitably, if you're going to use tea and coffee from the venue, that can be quite expensive. It's often a lot easier if the venue's got those big jugs that you can have coffee on tap, and the price is usually cheaper then.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we can discuss it with the venue, but I like the idea of cake. That sounds good. So thanks for that.
If you've got coffee and cake on the, if you've got coffee and cake on the, sorry,
it's Howard again. I'm sorry to interrupt. What we've done, because we've got the 5 new members, is obviously we've only got 3 spaces at every meeting for a prepared speech. So what we've agreed to do is, because we only meet on the 1st and 3rd Tuesday, we've agreed every time there is a 5th Tuesday in the month is to have an extra meeting in order that we can assist the newer members and all those that are aiming to qualify before the 30th of June to get awards, to have a special meeting. And that's gone down exceptionally well with the members.
Yeah, I think quite a few clubs run these extra meetings. Thanks, Howard. Any further questions, Brenda?
John Moran has his hand up.
There's a lot of Johns on this morning. Morning, John.
John, you're unmuted now. No.
Any written questions, Brenda?
John actually asked a question as well. Should the coffee be at the beginning, middle, or afterwards? Tea or coffee at the beginning sometimes literally warms up the guest and provides a feeling to participate more.
Yeah, it's a networking thing, isn't it? Is people are happier to chat with a coffee in their hand. I think we've done it usually when people arrive, and we've also had it when we have the sort of coffee break, and also if it's still available at the end. And that's why it's often better to have those big jugs full of coffee. So instead of having to pay for each individual coffee, that you've got a bulk supply of it.
Thanks, John. Margaret Stanway asked on which website is the poster that we mentioned earlier, and it's on the toastmasters.org website.
Yeah, the ones that I've mentioned are actually in the blueprint toolkit as well. So if you go into that toolkit that I mentioned, you'll find some example of posters in there. Any other questions, Brenda?
No more questions, John?
You want to unmute Gerard, see if he's got anything, any words of wisdom he can give to us?
And Brenda,
Yeah.
and everybody on board.
Morning,
It's hard for me to work and give words of wisdom to what's already been expressed. Maybe there are just some pointers I was making along the way, and I think it might have been Harold that mentioned it, where they sit down to inform the committee first. It's very, very important to inform the committee and also to inform the members, and to give them a slight bit of training on what is expected for the evening. Because sometimes I've appreciated that we say our own members can cluster together, you know, that can be just the way that friendship and fun happens in Toastmasters.
Yeah.
That's a good point, Gerard, isn't it? You don't want guests to come along and find it difficult to break into a clique of members. That we've got to make sure that our members on the night are offering all of their support and talking to individual guests.
That's right, because guests can come along too in pairs and they may hug together. You get my point that way too, because they come as pairs to support each other. So it's good for the members to be trained and well informed to actually communicate with the guests that night. I very, very much associate with repeating the flyers and changing the colors also. That is a very, very good thing. Yes. And to have it well prior to the meeting, because that can attract on that night, because repeating posters, people may pass it 6 times and on the 7th time the bell may ring to attend a meeting.
Yeah, and I think I like that idea of actually not using the same poster and the same color all the time or the same heading. That if you can vary the heading, if you can vary the color, then it looks as though it's a different poster than the original one.
That's right. And varying the word format also, you know, turning around what the emphasis of the meeting can be.
Yeah.
Relocate the meeting, the club meeting is a very good idea, John. You have mentioned either going to a cricket club or some football club or something like that. That is quite good. What I have done in my experience is we have taken a mini meeting to a location like a pub or something like that. That would be popular for both young and old people, and that has proved very successful. One of the places that is good for PR are churches and church notices.
Yes.
With regard to set your resources within the club. In any club, there's bound to be somebody with some relationship to PR, meaning a radio or a journalist or somebody that knows somebody, and that's a great way into actually getting stuff published. Also, in publishing anything, we have a lot of local newspapers, as you mentioned, John, and also some advertising magazines which appear in the supermarkets. To associate your press release with a photograph is a great connection, and it attracts the eye. With regard to the radio, then, from that point of view, our radio is a local radio and it covers a county of 52,000 people. It would have an afternoon, a popular afternoon and morning audience, but it is the afternoon program that is good. But what I have experienced is that it is the mature person that's listening to that program in the afternoon tells people that when they kind of get together for dinner or supper that somebody has been on the radio talking about Toastmasters, that communication. I definitely emphasize what Brenda has mentioned, that there's fun and that there's humor as a content. With regard to the greeting at the door when the guests are open night it's very good to have 2 guest greeters there, so that one person takes them and introduces them to the sergeant at arms or introduces to the room or whoever is managing the room, that they're just escorted in along. And also to have on board a membership application form, either in the guest pack or just in some place on a table.
Okay,
That's
thanks,
my
Gerard. You have got some words of wisdom. There are a couple more hands up, Brenda, if we can try and answer those before we close.
Okay, Aidan Coakley, you're unmuted.
Hello, Aidan.
Hello, hello, John. How are you?
Oh, good, thank you.
Good
How are
morning,
you?
Brenda. Very
Good
quickly,
morning.
the one thing I have noticed in my years of experience with Toastmasters, if you have an open night or if you have a lot of guests, try getting your speeches out of the way before the break, have your refreshments, and have a second half of a light topic session. And I have found that guests are more inclined to speak at the second half topic session before the general evaluator takes over.
Good idea.
Very good idea. Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. Thanks, Aidan. Andrea?
Not at all.
Have experience. Hello. Good
Hello,
morning.
Andrea.
Morning, Andrea.
Hi there. Good morning.
Seems like only a couple of days ago.
It was just a couple of days ago. Lovely to talk with you again, John, and the rest of the team. I wondered whether anybody had experience of taking leaflets to the train station where people are naturally thinking about their careers, either happy to go to work and wanting to progress, or wishing that they could change their work and with time to read through the leaflet. Is this something that has worked for anybody else?
I think that's a great idea, Andrea, and maybe even into the town centre on a Saturday and distribute them. We did that once, and that seemed to work quite well as well. But yeah,
Cool.
Train station's great.
Thank you. Has anybody actually done that? Do the train stations allow it?
I don't see any reason why they wouldn't. We've always worked on the principles. You do it until you're told you can't.
Yes, that's it. That's a very good principle. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrea. Okay, we are now at 2 minutes past 11, so I think we need to think about closing. Just a final tips I think I've thrown up here, just for people to take a good look at. I'd certainly look at exploiting Meetup, Facebook, Eventbrite, LinkedIn, Twitter, any social media opportunity you've got to publicize your meeting. Go back to past members. Don't forget the people that have been members in the past, and visitors that have been in the past, and inquirers that you've had in the past that may not have joined. You may just be able to get to them at the right time. I'd certainly encourage running more than one open house or guest night a year, maybe two, and those 2 times that I mentioned earlier on. Do something in the new year, do something after the summer break. Get that poster or flyer distributed as widely as possible, and that great idea from Andrew about doing the local station, get into the town centre, get into all the shops, supermarkets, libraries, anywhere, churches, I think Gerard's mentioned. And we're back to that message. It's a numbers game. The more information you're getting out into the local community, the more information you're getting out to potential members, the better chance you've got of getting the volume there on the guest night. This sort of last point here is about that in point of romancing. Somebody said that we need to treat our guests and our members as if they were guests in our own homes. And that lovely word of romancing, you know, really think about treating them like your first girlfriend or boyfriend. And that last point about persistence, that the more you do, the more you stick at it, the better results you're going to get. So just a few final tips. If I can thank everybody for coming on board today, if I can thank Brenda, Daniel and Gerard for their input and contributions. Thank you also for those speakers that came on and gave us their valuable views and valuable experiences. This recording will be made available to the general members, and I'm sure Brenda will give us a bit more closing information on that before we wrap up. So Brenda, any final points from you?
Just to echo the last tip on your slide, persistence, and to keep promoting your club and getting out into your community, and also reach out to your past members. They may have left because of family circumstances or for whatever reason, but it might be the right time for them to rejoin, and it might be the trigger to get them to come back to the club if you contact them.
Okay, thanks for that, Brenda. Thank you for being a great partner in this process, and I wish everybody else an enjoyable weekend and hope that the weather holds up for you. Thank you very much, Brenda.
Thank you, John.
Speak to you again soon. Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye now.
Bye.